have quite a diverse group. We have very young students who are maybe just leaving high school, as well as students who are mature students that are looking for a second career. And one of the things that you see with some of the younger students that is probably different from when 22 years ago I went through this exact same program is many of the students don't drive, so they rely on transit. And when you're talking about farms or greenhouses, they're not usually right close to, a transit line. So you'll get these great job postings that you see posted by a great employer, but that already will exclude a lot of them. Some of the other things that I see is, there's still a perception in a way that the pay is quite low after they've done their education. They still feel that they're not really being compensated, despite the fact that, I try to tell students it will move up, but sometimes they'll look to other sectors in horticulture, like outside of production, and they say, well, I can go work for a municipality and earn more money. And it's often, far less kind of responsibility that's being put on them compared to what they would be asked to do in a greenhouse or on a farm. So that's another challenge. When we had a meeting with our external advisory committee, which is, of course, our industry people that tell us how we're doing with our program and what they see, they were quite adamant that they know that the students are learning the horticulture skills through our program, but what they are seeing lacking a little bit is those soft skills. Some of these students have never been employed before, right? Maybe their very first employment is the work experience that they have to complete through this program. So, that has to be built up and it takes time. And I think sometimes employers want a little bit more of that when they're looking to hire someone.
Like I said earlier, where they're going to work is not necessarily where they're studying. So there's a disconnect between, and, again, a lot of urban municipalities reach out and they give good, 4-day work week, a lot of them over $25 an hour to start, with the promise of, if you want to come back, you can work up to head horticulturalist and all of that, and it's about being able to manage after you've put $10,000 into education. I think I had one of our, in between first and second year that worked cannabis. And the only reason that he worked cannabis was because the money was really good. He had worked there 2 or 3 years before he came to school. And he does not like the culture. He does not want to stay in it, but it's really good money. And so he can continue to work through school and he doesn't have to take student loans. So, it's one of those that he will work there until he's done. His 4th year, he will not be doing cannabis. One of the things that I am finding that I'm up against financially is the technology part of it. I try and I ask, I'm totally not embarrassed to send emails or talk to people at trade shows and say, this is a really cool product. I'd love to show it to my students. I have no money. Can you support us? And that's a roadblock for a lot of, and I get it. They can't just give away stuff to everybody that wants, but I can't do them any justice if they don't work with me to give, a discount, a deep discount, or a product for free. So our costs have doubled this year now that we've got more students in. We just can't physically put more than 30 kids into a classroom, into the greenhouses. So there's some challenges.
But speaking more to the labor component at the greenhouse, I mentioned we have, 12 months year-round production, and that production with a little bit of seasonality is pretty stable. So that allows us to offer something a little bit different from some of our field crop agriculture producers, which is that stability of year-round employment for our full-time staff. And so we do face some of the same challenges. I always, bemoan the fact that people think agriculture is not exciting. It's, an incredibly exciting sector with so much change happening. When we think of all the agri-tech and agri-innovations, the way that even in our small microcosm of, floriculture production, the way that that's happening now, even I'm just in my mid 30s, from even 30 years ago when I was, coming in, or 20 years ago, coming in as a teen, helping out. And then a little bit prior to that, or in the case of us constructing our greenhouse right now, the last time we built was in the late 90s, and we're now looking at 20 years of incredible automation, efficiencies, changes. And when you spoke to the science and engineering technical knowledge, we will need that. But when I think of what we can do to attract staff, because that is a challenge, some of it comes from having the foundation of our seasonal worker program for the general labor support, because that allows us to provide more flexibility with our Canadian staff who want weekends off, who, for some of our labor force who are moms or dads who are heavily involved in picking up kids from school, they want that flexibility to take off, at 3:15 in the afternoon, or arrive after 9 o'clock for maybe, an augmented schedule. So having that flexibility, which again, I cannot stress enough, is because of our temporary foreign worker program, has allowed us to retain staff. And then speaking to the salary point specifically, like, I'm comfortable sharing that our median salary point is just over $22 an hour, which, comparative to retail or food services, even with tips, is very competitive, especially for our area in Southern Ontario. And I think that that's something that, as a sector, we don't advertise enough. In some of my formal training, I have an economic development background, and I know for sectors, providing those salary reports and standards is incredibly important for students who are making the decision to go into and invest in themselves in a program, for operators when, they're candidly having conversations in the sector about how do we look at this long-term transition. So I touched on a couple quick points there, but it's, flexibility of staffing hours. But the challenge with that flexibility is we do have expectations for our staff to be on site when we need them. When those seasonal pressures come up, it's really hard to be as flexible as, maybe a non-perishable product manufacturer can be. Our flowers don't stop growing, and if we miss that window to get that product to the market, it's gone. So that's a very serious pressure that we're in. So it's complex, but happy to be having these conversations because it's so important.
Like a couple of the challenges that we face is honestly, it's housing. You have, you always hear about the rural brain drain. So there's a lot of kids and people that are moving away from the farms because those opportunities maybe weren't there. So now they're so far removed from maybe one step away from their parents, grandparents that were, come over here as immigrants or grew up on the farm knowing nothing about the farm. And it never, the opportunity or option was never there for them. So that was always interesting, which leads to, of course, living. When we just were very fortunate, I'll touch on it now, but we were working with IRAP for bringing in recent grads to horticultural programs. So we hired an amazing lady, Brenna, just fresh out of Brock University, environmental science and biology. It's a 9-month paid for quasi internship, to get people, fresh grads, interested in the paperwork. Of course, is always interesting filling those out, but that was the 1/10 of the problem. The other 99% of dealing with was the closest grocery store for me is 30 minutes. So that means the closest town is 30 minutes, which means the closest rental unit is probably 30 minutes away. So you're bringing somebody from the GTA or from the city, that seems to be all the applicants. And you're like, okay, you're going to move to a small town, but rent is what you're paying in maybe Georgetown. So there was like there was all over the place. So the living situation has been interesting, trying to attract talent for both. Okay, we're up and coming business. We're develop this awesome, cool program. It's so cool. You're going to be excited. You're going to be here for 9 hours a day. But the rest of the time, like, because I selfishly, I was able to, when I moved from Halifax and then moved to London. And I was very excited because then I could kind of keep that flow of, I'm 22 and I want to keep that social side. And it was like, okay, well, where is this going to live? That's going to work for somebody that keeps them interested for not only work, but also I want to raise a family here. I want to continue that. So trying to get them excited about that and make sure that those opportunities exist outside of maybe what has been conventionally like the urban bubble, which is totally fine, has been great, because you need that multifaceted candidate that wants to be here for more than 9 months, because you invest a lot of time in these people. And like we're all aware, time is tough to come by these days. So you're trying to find that full program for not only individual, but for the living has been huge. One spur of COVID has been the insurgence of people to these small towns. Tillsonburg is getting a Starbucks now. I think that just helped my hiring by like 25%. But that small towns are getting this boost of energy as of late, creates a lot of opportunities for after work activities.
One thing I think that we've noticed, especially lately, and we're trying to put our finger on what it is, but we're having real challenges filling entry-level positions. And, this is from, the 3-month summer student contracts through to a 3-year, junior technician. We're having trouble getting enough applicants. And in the past, maybe we were lucky that we were able to be a bit choosy. So we would always be looking to hire people from university. So either in the midst of a university program, looking for a co-op placement or something, or fresh out of university. And this is even for jobs where the reality is they're doing mostly kind of labor level work, but we were able to hire university grads or participants, and we took advantage of that because we're a science organization. And it's really valuable for us to have someone who has at least the background in science, who understands the necessary rigor for collecting data and the consistency that you require to do proper scientific research. It's not just the manual labor, it's an understanding of scientific principles, concepts, data collection, data entry, analysis, all of that kind of stuff, because typically we ask people to do all those things. They may be spending all week, planting out in the field or harvesting tomatoes in the greenhouse, but ultimately they have to come and collect the data and process the data as well. So we're asking them to do hard, heavy manual labor, but it's connected to the scientific data and the research. And so we've been lucky in that we've always been able to hire university students who do want to do that kind of thing. They put in their time, they accept the idea of doing hard manual labor because frankly, it's kind of a lot of fun for them, I think. That we have a fairly large population of young university students who hang out at lunch together, and it's kind of it's a fun experience, but they don't for a second think it's a career move. They're willing to do it for a while, but ultimately they move on because they have higher aspirations to do whatever it is they want to do. And so we're challenged with keeping people in those entry-level positions as well as filling them lately. And so we're having to rethink some of the requirements that, okay, maybe we don't need university degrees. We can get, certainly we tap into some of the college programs, but even people out of high school, maybe we can make the most of some of that labour pool where necessary. So we're forcing ourselves to be a little less picky, I think. So that yeah, I can speak more, but that's kind of the main labour challenge. You know, it's different once we start talking about the higher level positions, you know, where we require more education, experience and backgrounds, but those have their own challenges to fill as well. Yeah, one of the things we do, I mean, part of the reason why we want to look for university grads is that we get them entry level working in the field for one summer, but if they have potential, we have technical staff at many different levels, and so we like to hire people who have the capability to move up, and so where they may end up in more of a lab manager role or leading projects of their own. And so we're always got an eye to the potential of how far could this person go.
A couple things that have come up, I would say, with entry level, and I would say this is literally over the last week or two, is access to childcare. At least locally, and obviously everything is so regional with COVID, is that one parent is often left in charge of the kids. Often it's the mom, but frankly, it's just a parent. And childcare in schools have been really unreliable in the last 12 months. So what at least I've noticed through a couple of conversations we've had locally is that perhaps some people are not participating like they used to, because it's hard to get a job and then 3 weeks later go, sorry, I'm got to be off because I have to homeschool my child or more than one child or whatever the case may be, or what my child's daycare is on outbreak and we've got to navigate that now or whatever. Not every employer is going to be able to, to Stephanie's point, the plant's still got to be picked. Things still have to happen, which can make it a really tricky spot even for employers who are trying to be accommodating and stuff, right? So that's something that comes up. I don't know if that is an N of 2 or 3 that has kind of happened and we've just caught on to it, but it's certainly a theme I've heard a little bit about recently. Secondly, I also want to bring up a dynamic on farms that is very different than every other sector, and it's family. Also, there's real challenges if you're going up against the future owner of the company. Whose viewpoints are going to be considered more valuable? How are decisions going to be made there? Where do you see your future if you are not part of that family? And I certainly look within our sector where obviously the family farm still is predominantly what we see, but even amongst our larger farms that have, I would say, transitioned to a corporate model, those are still challenges and questions, right? That people maybe don't see where they're, are they going to work there 20 years out? Maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, but after that, things get a little tricky. I would say the challenge that I've personally seen as far as attracting people is we've done a fair number of job fairs for young people. So usually we try to go to the Build to Dream events to get women in non-traditional careers, which is funny because it's typically agriculture and corrective services, which is kind of hilarious. But as well, we've also done, when parents go with their kids to talk about what the career fairs are and those sorts of things. And the parents are often the ones being like, agriculture? Like, no, my kid's going to school so they don't have to work on a farm, which I think does a real disservice to agriculture in Canada. I think as someone who was not born and raised on a farm, I am a 0-generation farmer. I am a transplant from the city. I never, ever thought I would be in agriculture ever. And if you told 20-year-old me that I would be working for a greenhouse sector, she wouldn't believe you. I would have never thought of that. Like, this would have never been a field, but I love it. And it's totally different than everything I thought it was. I obviously am projecting my position perhaps on others as well, but I think agriculture is very different from the inside than how it's portrayed. And it's an advanced sector. It's amazing. It's dynamic. It's meaningful. There's a lot of those points that a lot of people are looking for in a career and work that I don't personally think that we do a very good job communicating. And not to the young people, and certainly not to their parents who are are influencing them, right, into what courses they're going to be picking and what streams they're going to be picking. And I think it's a real opportunity. And if we could get perhaps transit for some of these smaller towns, even if it's just to go to stop points in bigger cities and bring them out to the country in a milk run, as it were, it might work. Also, it then lends itself to more part-time positions or perhaps weekend employment, which, full-time Canadians don't want to work on the weekends, whereas perhaps students do, and international students and things like that, where Perhaps agriculture hasn't really looked for labor because we've been able to rely on seasonal programs and families, right? People having large families to help manage that, but that's not the case anymore. So yeah, I would say a lot of it echoes the same, and I think a lot of it is just about perhaps positioning ourselves better and challenging some of those stereotypes that are out there about what modern farming really means.